All right, before we get too deep into this podcast, I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of context. So, JD Vance and Zelensky and Trump obviously got heated in the White House. So, before we get into the debate itself, it's a little lengthy, so bear with us. But I sped it up in different parts to make it not as bearable. It's been cut down to about a 3-minute clip. But before that, I just want to give everyone a little bit of history. JD Vance and Zelensky do not get along. JD Vance has obviously been calling for the end to the funding of the war in Ukraine since pretty much the beginning. He's been pretty consistent on this point. More impactful than that, JD Vance also said in an interview that he, quote, doesn't care what happens to Ukraine. And for those of you who think I'm kidding, give it a listen.
Country. And I think it's ridiculous that we're focused on this border in Ukraine. I got to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another.
Well, that's the clip. And now let's listen to the full clip. Like I said, we sped it up, so just bear with us, and then we'll get right into the show.
Hey, I have to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the president of the United States' words mattered more than the president of the United states' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied it, our parts, big parts of Ukraine, parts of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014.
Yeah, yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
exactly right.
yes, but during 2014 till 2022, you know, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him. Me, like a new president in 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel. We signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed with him with gas contract. Gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broke the ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you're
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems like bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You
God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what
Remember, you're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
This entire meeting?
No, in this entire meeting, you said thank you. You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble. Wait a minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone. We gave you, through this
said
stupid president, $350 billion.
We
gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military equipment. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you'd take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
Guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful. Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make. Because the attitudes have to change.
Well, that was the absolute fucking shit show that happened in the White House over the weekend. Darren, what did you make of the argument between the vice president, the president, and Zelensky?
Well, I don't know because there's a few different theories out there. Some people say it was organic. Some people say it was inorganic. Like maybe Trump and Vance had planned it. Or even some people think maybe perhaps Zelensky planned his outburst because it seemed like he was almost home free. They were on like the last question. And then, Vance says something, and it wasn't even really directed at Zelensky, but Zelensky takes that as an opportunity to kind of get a little argumentative with J.D. Vance. And it's really just the way I interpreted it, it's kind of inexplicable. I don't know why he just didn't keep his mouth shut, and then none of this really would have happened. Because I don't think what JD said prior to Zelensky challenging him on it was really, directed to him. If anything, Zelensky, you would expect him to have been more angry and fired up when one of the reporters midway through the press conference said, Mr. Zelensky, why don't you ever wear a suit? Some stupid question just meant to provoke him, But, he didn't get really all that angry about that. He got angry over innocuous statement by Vance. And the whole meeting before that, there was maybe a low-grade tension in the press conference before that last 10 minutes, but it was overwhelmingly jocular, amicable. It was not, they were not overtly hostile to one another up until that point. So I just don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why Zelensky just took not even taking the bait. He just kind of, he just screwed himself. I don't know why, but what are your thoughts?
I can't possibly believe a guy as informed and as intelligent as you came away from watching that clip and said, you know what? Zelensky's the one at fault. I think that's honestly a little ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, okay. Hold on. What do you mean? Because
well, no. Hold on. The entire
you give me your thought.
The entire 45 minutes, Zelensky is sitting there patiently. He's trying to softly correct President Trump. So when President Trump says well, we're giving you most of the money, and he's like, well, that's not really true. Europe is our ally. They've actually given 60% of the aid. You've only given 40%, and he's like, well, your whole country's destroyed, and he's like, well, that's not really true. Our kids still go to school. He's having to softly correct a 5-year-old, and he's doing that because he has no other choice. He's just being forced to kind of all right, I have to sidestep all of this and walk on eggshells constantly. But for the most part, I feel like he did a really good job. There's really a very low level of tension over this deal. And then all of a sudden, he asked J.D. Vance a question. And I don't know if you know about the history of J.D. Vance and his position on Ukraine. He is not just against, it's not our fight. He is no, this is the worst thing in American foreign policy in my lifetime. And he was including the Iraq War. He was including, all of the wars in the Middle East. The idea, and then he just used this as a chance to beat Zelensky over the head. I don't even know why he's there. for God's sakes. Like I can't imagine, like I said, that you could come away with Zelensky's the one who had the problem and picked the fight. He's going out of his way not to pick the fight, and he's just trying to correct JD on what he said, which was unbelievably false.
Well, hold on. JD, all he said, and look, you know me, I'm not some JD Vance fan, but in this last 10-minute segment, JD was answering a question from a reporter, and he was talking about taking a diplomatic approach, and then Zelensky butted in and said, "Well, we've tried, you know, agreements with Putin, and Putin has not held his word, so how can you say that, he'll hold his word this time, it'll all be good, yada yada." And that's a fair argument,
It's
I would
unbelievably
say.
fair. I think you steelmanned that pretty good. But I think the part that you're forgetting is during all these agreements with between Russia and Ukraine, like it's only caused Ukraine to lose more and more land. So he tells JD Vance, like, what diplomacy are you talking about?
And in that sense, I do agree. I do agree that he makes a good point. And I agree with Zelensky on that one. But also, like, why even say it? You're almost home free. Like, what you're going to say in that moment is not going to change, JD's or Trump's mind on how to go forward with this. In which, to me, it's not even like that great a deal for him, but it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. And I think in order for him to keep getting U.S. support, he does need the deal. Like,
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're gonna tell me that Zelensky had to sit there and listen to Trump basically defend Putin on a number of occasions, right? I mean,
I'm not a fan.
explicitly.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Trump's, I guess, style, like his way of doing it, where he's acting completely neutral and then sometimes like pro-Russian. I mean, basically, I'm not a fan of that. I guess that's his diplomacy. That's his diplomacy. He's
You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, "Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal?" That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe.
trying to seem as impartial as possible.
We
And
shouldn't seem impartial. I want to be very clear, we are on the side of the Ukrainians here. We are not supposed to be a neutral arbiter of this. Okay. The idea that Trump is supposed to be like a guy who's like arbitrating a divorce, for God's sakes. Like, no, he's more of a lawyer for one of the spouses. Like, that's how I view him. And he's trying to come in and, well, I got to make a deal. I tell you what, he doesn't like you very much either. He doesn't like it. Like, what? Why are you ceding the framework and trying to be charitable to something this is just obviously not true? This is just
look,
obviously not
look,
true.
I've disliked their style throughout this. They've been giving way too many concessions. Like when Pete Hegseth was at that, I don't even remember where it was. He was doing some press conference and he said, "Yeah, I don't think NATO membership is on the table. That's unrealistic. And yeah, Ukraine is, probably going to lose some territory." It's like you're giving up before the battle even begun.
Right. Of course.
So I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan. And you know me, I am pro-Ukraine. I guess my only point is with the whole Zelensky thing, because I don't want to like digress too far, and I want to stay on the point. If Zelensky had just kept his trap shut, then he would get a mutually advantageous deal signed in, and he'd be. I mean, things would still be bad for him, but they'd be a whole lot better than where he is now.
Let me just round off on this, and then we can go into the actual like why he was there, right? But I just want to say that like the idea that Zelensky is supposed to come over here. He was invited over here, by the way. There's some media in the right wing circles that are saying that he'd had to come over here. He could have signed it in Kiev. That's not true. He was invited by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. It was not, no, that's not true. And the idea that he got invited over here and he had to listen to like Kremlin talking points for God's sakes, you know, the idea
Yeah,
they had to listen to the Russian framework of the war that is going on, and what he's just supposed to sit there and take it. I mean, listen, I can understand like for like practical reasons, like you just got to sit there and shut up. I get it, but I totally understand him standing up for not only his people but for the allies and the European front who are also trying to say like, no, this is not like a Ukrainian aggression war. This is a Russian aggression war.
well, look, I totally get it. And if I were him, I would be infuriated as well. But I mean, as the leader, you just kind of have to take it and swallow it. I mean, Trump, anytime a foreign leader visits with Trump, with the exception of one, you know, we're talking about the king of Jordan, Keir Starmer just before this meeting with Zelensky. I mean, Trump is just he's humiliating them. He's humiliating them. And I guess he was fine with Modi. He didn't really humiliate Modi. But yeah, I mean, he's putting them in their place and letting them know, like, hey, you're a vassal. You're not, you rely on us. You're gonna do a little groveling. And so, and I mean, that's kind of our right as the superpower.
Well, I think just really quick, and then we can hop back onto this Ukraine part. I think that the European Union, and not just, well, I shouldn't say the European NATO, is I think ready to move on without us. Like there's talks today. I'm sure you saw. We're filming this Monday, of course, but there's talks that they're already considering like building a ceasefire and a weapons deal and a humanitarian aid deal without the U.S. involvement. Like Europe is ready to throw us to the side and be like, let us handle this, which I think maybe that was part of Trump's plan. Like, maybe he didn't want Europe to take total control, or maybe he did want Europe to take total control of this and just kind of leave us out of it.
Perhaps. I don't know. And I don't know what drives, I don't know why Trump is so, philo-Slavic. I don't understand why he takes this almost pro-Russian angle
because they got him elected twice.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like that's overstated. I think maybe Trump does feel some personal sympathy, weirdly, to Putin, but I mean, I don't understand it because
you think he feels some sympathy toward Putin? Do you think?
Well, yeah, yeah, but like from a strategic point of view, I think you can make a moral argument saying like, oh, we should end the war because more Ukrainians are going to go into the meat grinder in a conflict they can't win. But from a strategic point of view, I think we should continue the war because and possibly even join in because I think we kind of need to like establish like a deterrent threat, and if we just like for lack of a better word, look like pussies and just, capitulate. What does that say to China? There's all this talk of, people are theorizing, oh, well, we want to abandon Russia and Ukraine because we want to pivot towards China, the Pacific, and maybe focusing a little more on Israel. But it's like, if we don't focus on Russia now, and then China invades Taiwan, who's going to be assisting China? Well, it'll be Russia. So, it's to me, I would prefer we continue the war and, degrade Russia's military and maybe even do far, far worse than just degrading the military. But
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't share that view at all, to be honest with you, that we should continue this war for the sake of degrading Russia's military. I think it's kind of like a neocon like era view of this war, you know? Ideally, Russia would turn back around and just give Ukraine at least the area it's ceded since 2022 when this war started. I'm not expecting Crimea back, but at least leave, where this war started. Um, but the idea, I think you had a really good point, because what kind of message does this say, not just to China and to North Korea and Iran? What about this question? Because I'm sure you're aware of the nuclear guarantee we made to Ukraine in the 1990s, correct?
yeah, it's like the non-proliferation thing.
Right. Basically, long story short, in 1994, when the Soviet Union split before that, Ukraine had most of the nuclear armament of the Soviet Union. And we told them, along with the British and the Russians, like, hey, give up your nukes and we will offer you security guarantees. And we've basically kind of copied that with a million other countries. For example, Saudi Arabia has a similar agreement, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. And basically the deal is this: if you agree never to like build your own nuclear arsenal, we the United States will offer you protection. The problem is that when Russia invades Ukraine, we're taking the Russian side right now. So what kind of message does that send to South Korea, where it's like, can we really depend on the United States for security guarantees? Because, some political like wave may come in and then be like, we don't want to defend South Korea. We don't want to defend Iran or Saudi Arabia against Iran. We don't want to defend Ukraine. Like this has got real worldwide implications, you know?
Oh, I agree. It's scary because I mean, well, I just agree wholeheartedly. I mean, what kind of message are we sending Saudi Arabia and all these other countries that have maybe denuclearized? So, one of one of I remember one time when Obama was leaving office, there was some interview that they did with him, and they said, "What keeps you up at night?" And he said, "Pakistan, because of the nukes and all that."
Right.
And I'm like, well, how are we ever going to denuclearize like places like Pakistan if we're, not willing to give these guarantees to Ukraine? I mean, but that's been said.
Yeah, no, 100%. Um, I guess back to this deal though. This and the
Oh
audience
yeah,
can't
we can
tell.
we can argue about the deal, I guess. Yeah.
I'm I'm not I'm not a big fan of the deal, right? So Zelensky comes over here and he's claiming he's going to negotiate this deal, because the deal, it wasn't just like a come over and sign. Like even Trump said that during the press conference, if you want to call it that. But he said, hey, we're going to go back there and negotiate. And Zelensky basically told the entire world what he wants. He only wants three things. He wants a security guarantee for Ukraine. He wants to share military technology between NATO and Ukraine. So this would be like drone technology for like air defense or air technology. And then he just wants the US and NATO to allow for the exchange of prisoners and civilians. That's all he wants. Those three things. That's it. And then the United States comes to him and he says, "We want 50% of everything you have." So And that includes, the raw earth, the oil, natural gas, lithium, all those things. Uh, the problem is that I'm not even sure that we're going to be able to mine a lot of that or harvest a lot of that. And then B, the U.S. said none of this comes with a security guarantee, not a single bit. There's not a like how, and it's not a peace deal. It's not a ceasefire. That's the other part. No part of this deal has Russia's signature that says we're going to stop firing. None of it. So, like, you tell me, Darren. Like, what? How is Zelensky supposed to sign that?
Well, I would say he has to sign it because it's, from the looks of it, the best he's going to get. And I don't think it's the worst deal he could ever get. It's not my fantasy of a deal, but uh, to let me be charitable to it. So Trump has to square a circle. He has to maintain the, facade of America first and being this anti-war president with the fact that he wants to keep funding Ukraine and, maybe, and the fact that he wants to, ensure a level of, security to Ukraine. Well, how does he do that? Well, he can't put pen to paper, you know, you know, he can't say like, "Oh, well, we're just going to keep giving you money for nothing." He has to do something to please the base. So the rare earth minerals, honestly, it's contested like how much rare earth minerals Ukraine really has compared to other countries where we could get it from that would be less hazardous,
Yeah, like Mexico,
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So this is all just, a facade to, to launder it with the base. So he has to do that. And he's going to use American workers and, with American companies, and he is going to put them in there in Ukraine effectively as human shields so that if Russia mistakenly kills enough of them, that will force US action. So it's not a security guarantee, but it's almost like a tacit security guarantee. It's like a it's like a security guarantee light. And it ensures that, you know, it entrenches us further than we are, and it ensures that we will keep funding the war effort because like what, we're not going to stop paying for their security once Americans are there. Like they're going to keep receiving U.S. funding. So, you know, this goes back to my point of why Zelensky should have just swallowed it. He like Trump said. I mean, he has no cards. He might as well have just swallowed his pride, just taken the deal, even though it's not my fantasy of the deal. It's fairly good in my estimation. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing. And if anything, there's a chance there that the U.S. gets way more involved, which I'm sure Zelensky wants. So, why not just, stomach it and take this pretty good deal? But maybe what do you think of the deal? I imagine you're not a fan, but do you kind of see where I'm coming from? Where it's like
Yeah, let me because Marco Rubio actually made basically the exact same argument. I'm not sure if you got it from him or if you got it from Sagar or whoever.
well,
But
I honestly got it just from Trump himself. He retweet or he truths something that basically said exactly what I'm.
yeah, well, basically, and I can't remember who was interviewing Marco Rubio, but they asked him like straight up. They said, "Hey, like this deal doesn't come with any security guarantees. Like, what the heck?" And he was like, "Listen, we're going to be putting American civilian boots on the ground to harvest these resources. Like, can you think of a bigger like security guarantee than like American lives? Like, if Russia kills like 1,000, and he didn't say this part, but he said, if Russia bombs 1,000 people kill or harvesting like raw earth minerals, like that's going to force America's hand to be like permanently involved, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, I'm not the biggest fan of using American civilians as like a deterrent, right? You're putting them in harm's way intentionally when you can just do what you were going to do anyway. You know what I mean? Like, and again, this deal does not get us closer to a ceasefire. The whole point of this deal, and I felt like Trump said that at the very beginning, he said this is just for compensation of what we've already given, you know? Like, this has nothing to do with ending the war. This just gives Ukraine, this is just like on the promise that we're going to continue to give them more aid, basically. Like, this is just a bribe. Like, give us something in return.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a way for him to just, like I said earlier, to justify the
Launder it
war
to the
with the
base.
base. Yeah.
But I will say I do think that Zelensky at the end of the day is going to have no other choice but to sign this deal. So like as bad as it might be, like to me at least, then he's not going to have a choice. And like that sucks, but you know what? War is hard and you got to do what you got to do for the betterment of your people. Like I totally get it. Because like you said, I'll be honest with you, who's in a bigger position to bully who right now? It's definitely the United States. The only weapon that Zelensky even has right now is public support. And I got to be honest with you, we've already seen over the weekend public support basically flip almost, or at least meet in the middle, where it's basically like a 55 support, 45 are against now. It just this is why I'm like extremely angry at like what the administration did because I think that they did this on purpose. There's no reason to have Vance in there knowing his position on Ukraine. I mean, he said himself he doesn't really care what happens to Ukraine. And the idea that Trump does either is ridiculous. He doesn't care. He just wants this war to end so that way he can go to his next war with Iran, in my opinion. But we'll save that one for another day. You know, he
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to agree that like I don't know why exactly where Trump just really wants to make this pivot away from Russia Ukraine, but uh, my best guess is Iran. Like I do I do feel like that is the next big kahuna. That's the thing they're going to go after next. Especially with how insanely in the tank Trump is for Israel. I mean,
Right.
and then that as well as the pivot to the Pacific, but that's kind of been in the works since I guess Obama. So
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, like Trump is worried about getting compensated right now. I tell you what, he could kill two birds with one stone right now. So Europe has roughly $300 billion in frozen Russian assets in Europe right now. If him and the European allies just confiscate that, which I'm not even sure that we're allowed to do because it's not like we don't own that, right? It's just frozen.
Mhm.
Then it would compensate us and then some. Like our 122 billion that we've given would be totally. I mean, that's easy, right?
Oh yeah.
And same with Europe. And he could kill the Russia collusion shit once and for all. And I shouldn't say once and for all, but he would also be able to, sell this to the base. He's like, look, this war costs you nothing, and we're defending an honorable cause. But he won't do that. And we know he won't do that because at the end of the day, Putin won't let him. And that's really what this is about, right? Like this is about Putin won't let him back out or continue to support Ukraine. I'll tell you what, I'll ask you this. Do you think that Trump keeps claiming, this war would have never happened while I was president? Do you believe that that's true, or do you think that that's like a crock of BS?
Um, I don't know, because my assumption is that uh, you know Putin did this because of Western encroachment, eastward, uh, and he was feeling insecure because of that. At least that's my assumption that that's the real reason or main reason. I don't buy any of this denazification, like BS that
The
Putin.
Russian propaganda.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just so silly. It's unbelievable. What about you? What about you?
I don't really buy it, to be honest with you. Like the idea that, I mean, so don't get me wrong, Putin didn't invade while Trump was president, but he still broke the ceasefire. I mean, according to Zelensky, he violated the ceasefire 25 times while Trump was president. Like, I mean, those are, like, what are you going to say, that the kids didn't die? Like
Oh
how
yeah.
it's the idea that like it was just peaches and roses while Trump was president. I don't think is really true because I mean, uh, Crimea was under Russian occupation. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like, like
Well, even if you exclude Crimea, I thought, and I could be wrong, but I thought the fighting in the Donbass region never really fully ever subsided, and
you're right.
that was another reason why Putin kind of kept the fighting going because, you know, I guess one of the preconditions to being in NATO is that you can't have an ongoing like
Right.
conflict in your borders. So if people are still fighting in the Donbass, that makes Ukraine too insecure to be,
Ineligible. Right.
yeah, ineligible to be put in NATO. So
So just kind of, as we go for like a soft landing here in terms of like potential endings, I would just like to say like this is like the history of Ukraine, like according to Zelensky, right? So his whole thing is, because JD Vance said like, well, we have to go with diplomacy. Diplomacy is the only way out. It's the only thing that's going to get us out of this. That'll achieve peace. Da 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 da. It sounds great on Fox News, I'm sure. It's one of those things like if you're stupid, I'm sure it sounds phenomenal. But the
oh
problem
my
is,
God.
the problem is that Darren, it's been tried so many times. They tried it with George Bush, they tried it with Obama, and then he invaded Crimea. They tried to sign a ceasefire in 2019, which is when Trump was president. They violated it every step of the way. Ukraine has done nothing but try and handle this diplomatically, right? And all it's gotten them is they completely lost Crimea to Russian occupation. There's been basically over a decade of constant fighting on the Donbass contact line. And for the past 3 years, we've been at full scale war. So the idea that diplomacy seems to be the answer, I think Zelensky is right. The only thing that Putin has responded to in any way, like meaningfully, has been a strong army. Like Ukrainian javelins, which Trump gave him. I will concede that right now. Trump gave him lethal aid, which the Obama administration would not do. And Zelensky has been able to fight a Russian army that is a nuclear superpower and beat them back past the Donbass, launch their own counteroffensive, and then force the Russian army to be so like broken that they're having to pull conscripts from Ukraine or not Ukraine from North Korea for God's sakes. So I think Zelensky has a fair point. I think the problem with peace here, and this will segue into like what we would like to see happen, is the problem is that to achieve peace at any meaningful level, you have to strike a deal that Putin can use to propagandize against his own people. So like Putin has to sell this. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So in your opinion, what would you like to see that kind of, I'm not going to say makes everybody happy, but makes, you the most happy?
What would make me the most happy is if, well, being realistic, as optimistic as realism can afford, maybe Putin gets all of what he's captured thus far, but in exchange, the rest of Ukraine, call it instead of like East and West Germany, call it East and West Ukraine. West Ukraine becomes like full like NATO membership, uh, security guarantees, whatever, and uh, you know, maybe some economic partnerships, but that to me seems like the most uh, optimistic, even if it's a little less realistic, but within the realm of possibility, like kind of endings to this war that could perhaps, give Putin something, like you said, to sell to his base, saying like, "Oh, look, we've conquered like 20% of Ukraine, and now we have all this land around the Black Sea, and we have the Donbass." So, uh, good, 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 and then Ukraine can say, "Well, we've taken many losses, but now we're safe because we have this. We're in NATO." So I think that would be fairly easy to sell to I mean, I would assume fairly easy to sell to the Ukrainian people. What about you? Like within the realm of somewhat realism,
Sure.
within the realm of plausibility.
Right.
Where how would you like to see this conflict be ended?
Well, so I think in all reality, like we have to face the fact that like what we're likely going to see is some sort of land for peace deal. In other words, to the audience, the Ukrainian government will give up, say, the eastern region of Ukraine, which is known as the Donbass, right? In exchange for either a ceasefire or a permanent like peace negotiation, right? Whether that comes with it would be ideal for me if that's going to happen. If Ukraine is actually going to be forced to give up land that is rightfully theirs, the only compensation that I would accept is NATO admission. That's the only thing that I would say that this is even remotely a win. Um, I do got to say though, I don't know if NATO countries even want that because it seems incredibly likely that Putin may just invade again. You know, why would he stop? He's proven that if you just continue to push like a non-nuclear power, the nuclear powers aren't going to do anything realistic to stop you because at the end of the day they don't want nuclear. They don't want even the risk of nuclear exchange. So we've got a problem. Um and it pretty much just comes to like a standoff. Uh but I would love to see some sort of admission into NATO. Like that's my biggest ask. Is like how do we get to a point where once the peace deal is signed, we get them admitted into NATO?
Okay, so we basically agree then on within the realm of what's possible, what would be best. That okay, yeah, we basically came to the same idea. I did want to touch though on something you said earlier, and about how well the Ukrainians have fared against Russia. Uh, you know, I just don't know what to think regarding who has fared the best. I've seen estimates and numbers that people have thrown out there, and I think Zelensky said in not yesterday's, but this last press conference, I think he said like Russia has taken 700,000 casualties. I kind of struggle to believe that number because I recall I want to say it was last year, maybe July. I'll say July, kind of mid-year last year. Some figure got thrown out like that Russia had taken like 300,000 casualties, give or take. And people back then even were saying that might be a little high. People don't know. And then, I've tried to find, official, what I can, like official numbers, and
Mm-hmm.
uh to me it's, I don't know, it could be many 100,000 less than 700,000, and everybody has a different estimate, and every estimate is within a range, so, and like, the Ukrainians have fought really bravely, but I just can't, in my mind, I cannot figure out who, like, what's propaganda, what's fake, what's real, who who's like really suffering the most. But I mean, well, obviously the Ukrainians are suffering the most, but who's, relatively speaking, doing well on the battlefield? Obviously Ukraine is gonna have just a natural disadvantage since it's so much smaller, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, I can't tell because, if you listen to the New York Times, they'll have you thinking like that Ukraine could win this, at some point in the relative near future, just as long as they keep receiving aid. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. And then, you listen to these, conservative pundits that, may or may not be being funded by Russia itself, and, and they'll have you believe that, any day now, Ukraine could fall, and, and I will say Ukraine's lasted longer than I thought it would. When this conflict broke out, I was like, oh, it'll be over in like a month or something. I remember telling people that and thinking I was so smart, but, lo and behold. So I don't know. What do you think? Is I mean,
Well, so I'll tell you, in terms of the casualties, I mean, I mean, listen, I'm not confident in really any of the numbers, to tell you the truth. Um, like I don't know, I couldn't tell you if the casualty number is closer to 100,000 or a million. I really couldn't, because like you said, it depends on who you trust. If you go to the Russian Ministry of Defense, I mean, they'll tell you we've killed a million Ukrainians. And if you go to the Ukrainians will tell you like, well, we've lost, basically like, 300,000, whatever. I'm using arbitrary numbers here. Um, the U.S. and the U.K. say that the Russians have lost almost a million people, and that's not all killed, right? That's like killed and wounded, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I don't think that it really. I don't want to say matters because obviously it does, but like, so like when we fought Vietnam, we lost around 60-ish thousand Americans. Do you know what the Vietnamese people lost to win that war? Somewhere in
I
the
do not know the
neighborhood of
number.
like two to 3 million people.
Yeah.
Okay. But what mattered was their will to fight. So when the Germans were fighting the Russians on the Eastern Front, one battle, Stalingrad, 900,000 Germans were casualties, you know, about the same, Soviets were casualties. So this idea that like these casualty numbers matter, like, yes, they do matter. And we should do everything we can to stop the war. But at the end of the day, if the Ukrainian will is there to fight and they want to continue fighting this war because it's their home and whatever, I think that we should support that till they decide that they don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah, I only think like maybe the casualty numbers would matter, and like, if, the population of Russia is like what, 150 million? So like, let's say a million Russians end up, you know, killed or wounded, but, let's just say a million Russians get killed. So one in 150 are killed. That would be pretty noticeable, I think. If you're just like a civilian living at home, to see like 1 in 150, like surely there's, and I know it's Russia, so it's more authoritarian, but surely there is like a contingent of that population who is not in favor of this war that would give ammunition to. And I don't know exactly what the social contract is over there in Russia, but I imagine that, you know, to some degree, the people, you know, kind of tolerate Putin as long as he's not, you know, really, really effing up their lives. I don't know. I wonder if maybe Putin. Well, I say all that, but hasn't Putin's popularity risen since this war broke
I
out?
I couldn't tell you. I I can't tell you how disinterested I am with Putin's popularity at home. It, I mean, the extent to which those people, especially like during wartime, that they're propagandized, like give me a fucking break, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I listen, and I'm not saying that it's not like a tragedy, and I'm not saying that their lives didn't matter. I'm obviously just saying that, like, in terms of like, do we continue the fight or do we not continue the fight? I think it's irrelevant because I think largely the Ukrainian people want to continue fighting, and they're not asking for bodies, dude. And I know you get this, but this is something that a lot of people think. They're not asking for U.S. boots on the ground. They're not asking for British boots or French boots or NATO boots or even fucking peacekeepers. All they're asking for is give us weapons, give us ammo, and then let's see if we can share some technology so that we can shoot down some fighter jets. That's all we want, you know?
Mhm.
And I feel like if that's all they're asking, it's such a small price to pay. I mean, we're about to give, I mean, how much aid have we given to, say, a country like Israel, and they don't even need it? I mean,
For real.
here's and that's listen, that's just my opinion about Israel, but I mean, here's the people who actually need it and people that we're obligated to help defend by treaty, and all they're asking for is money and ammo. Like, give me a break, you know?
I agree. I mean, it's ridiculous that, you know, this, which, you know, I try to look at things through a relatively amoral lens, but I mean, if you want to bring morality into it, Ukraine is so obviously in the right, and here we're like, people are like balking at the idea that we should give them more aid when it's real. I mean, it's not like we're feeling the loss of an extra even 100 billion. I mean, we don't notice that domestically. I mean, uh, so it's no skin off our uh, noses uh, to give them another however many billion. But like you said, we give Israel all that, and it's kind of just expected because all the politicians are in the tank for them. So it is just ridiculous that, and Israel has committed all these egregious war crimes on top of that. So there's not even like if you're being objective about it, there's not even like reason you could justify one and not the other. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, most
it
of
is
the
ridiculous.
and this will probably be one of our last topics on this, but what do you think is like the most common reason for the opposition to the support of Ukraine? Because clearly it's not a very educated like dissent, in my opinion. It's pretty much just a people who are like, we have to be isolationist for the sake of being isolationist, you know? Like it doesn't matter how good the cause is or how much this might benefit us. Like it only like they're almost like too principled on the idea that like we shouldn't give money to anybody. And it's like, really? That's ridiculous.
And see, that would almost, I mean, if that were actually carried out, where, Ukraine doesn't get any money, but Israel also doesn't get any money, then I would find that far more acceptable. But that's not the case. I mean, Israel is always going to get the money, uh, even if we stop shoveling money to Ukraine. And and to answer your question, I don't know. Like, I don't understand why there is this uh like contempt for the Ukrainians. Like, I don't understand it at all, really.
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
get it. I don't get it either. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I've tried to steel man this with several people who I know personally who are extremely anti-Ukraine, and there's no like reason. And what I mean by reason, obviously, is like a justifiable like explanation for why they have the position that they have, right? Like it's just it's like it's almost like saying like why do you like the color blue, and it's like just because I do. I don't know, like, and I'm like, see, that doesn't that doesn't make any sense to me. We're talking
yeah,
about
like,
geopolitics and you're telling me you just don't like it because you don't like it. Like that doesn't what.
yeah, I've never found the anti-aid to Ukraine arguments very compelling. I mean, I guess if I were to steel man it, like to give my best steel man, I would say, well, we don't want to risk World War III. We don't want to risk a nuclear, you know, engagement, confrontation, I should say. So,
Yeah.
if I were being totally charitable to that line of thinking, that would be what I throw out there. But, but that's not the line they typically take. That's kind of like a looking at it more, impartially and, dispassionately, like saying, well, that might not be in our interest. The people who oppose it, they typically bring, the money into it. Like, oh, yeah, you Ukrainians, you better give us our money back. It's like, well, have you really noticed the billions that were spent? I mean, I
Right.
don't think
and
you have. It's a very small percentage of our GDP, and we're
and these are the same morons that'll say like we have starving kids here in America. Why are we sending all this money to Ukraine? And then somebody will ask the next logical question is, well, do you want to fund the starving children in America? And they're like, no, we don't want to fund anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, like you're just a brain dead like mouth breather. Like this is there's no negotiating with you. But the fact is their vote counts the same as you and me.
Oh yeah. Well, even that, it's like I've always kind of hated that argument. Like, oh, we have so many problems at home. We have starving kids in America. It's like, I obviously, yes, there are kids that have terrible home lives, and their parents are deadbeats, so maybe they miss a few meals. But we have more of an obesity problem, way more of an obesity problem in this country than we do a starvation problem. So, and that's honestly kind of with it, with very obvious exceptions, that is almost the case in the entire world because globalization has made everyone very prosperous.
Well,
So,
access to food has, and listen, it's a relative assessment. People, everyone, just calm down. I'm not saying Darren's not saying starving people don't exist. It's not what we're saying. We're saying that relative to even 70 years ago, the access to food worldwide is unbelievable. If you were to describe the lifestyle that we live, just in terms, forget technology, forget roads, forget infrastructure, just access to food is something that they would not even be able to comprehend. The fact that,
oh yeah.
your poorest people on the planet could eat 1,000 calories a day. That to like a middle-aged peasant is anyway, sorry to get off topic. I really agreed with what you said.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's always just something of mine that I always that argument always comes up, and it's just such a silly argument because, people domestically by and large are not suffering. Okay. If they do suffer, it's, rather A, because they're a kid and they don't have like control over their lives, so the terrible actions of adults will affect them, or B, they're an adult and probably the act, you can really rest all the blame on themselves at that point because it's pretty easy to get along in this country. I mean, things have risen in prices, no doubt, but if you're even moderately, you don't even have to be like of average intelligence to be able to get an apartment, that's shelter, you know, go to, buy cheap groceries, you're set. You're set.
Yeah.
Uh, it-
Now, to cycle back, I just had a quick question that I just thought of. So this U.S. mineral deal that you were hoping for in your deal, um, so let's say they put U.S. boots on the ground, which is what they said that they were going to do. That's how they're going to collect the minerals. These human shields, as you called them.
oh yeah.
Um,
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it?
what what do you think would happen if Russia continued to invade while there's U.S. citizens in the Donbass, or maybe let's say they're not even just wherever they are, right? If Russia invades and kills however many U.S. civilians, whether it's 10, whether it's 100, I doubt it would be as much as 1,000, but whatever the number is, like, what happens then?
Well, I think if they kill like 10, I mean, that would warrant a pretty big response. Yeah, I don't know. We had those. Oh gosh, where was that? It was last year. We had some service members. It may have been. It may have been in Syria, maybe, before the fall of Assad, and there were some like IRGC affiliated terrorists, and uh they fired a rocket or something, or fired a drone maybe into a U.S. military base, and it killed some service members, and I think that warranted some strikes on the proxies. So on the Iran's proxies. So if I'm recalling correctly, I think it just depends on the quantity and the size. Like, if Russia kills 5 people, then we're going to respond without a doubt. How that looks like, I don't know. I mean, maybe we strike a few locations within Russia. Now, that would be a significant escalation, but it's possible. Maybe we give the Ukrainians a ton more stuff, or get rid of a red line, not red line, but a boundary we've imposed upon the Ukrainians, so we could say like, oh, you can strike X distance into uh Russia, and we give you the green light because Russia did this. So maybe that happens. I don't know. I'm sure they have like a whole menu of like, you know,
Contingencies.
yeah, like this would be an appropriate response to X event, and you have this many options. So it could be any number of things, but for what the one thing that is certain is that if harm does come uh, our way, it'll escalate. And that's why I think, by putting these American human shields there, I don't want to say it'll have a freezing effect on the battle lines, but it might have like a real chilling effect. Like in a video game where it has like, I don't know, you have like a sword that has like, like some frost enchantment. It like slows down the enemy. It might do that a little. It will like might slow Russia down because they'll have to be more careful not to harm these people incidentally. What do you think?
Hell, if I'm being completely honest, if we send U.S. shields over there, uh, Trump will come out and he will say, "Well, I just got off the phone with Putin, and he said it. He didn't kill him." And I don't see why he would lie. I mean, that's basically, if you don't know, I'm referring to what he said at Helsinki in
Oh yeah,
2017.
yeah, I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
play that clip really quick for the audience.
Came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this: I don't see any reason why it would be.
But yeah, that's the clip where basically he says like, "Well, you know, our agency said this, and the FBI said this, CIA said this, naval intelligence said this, but Putin said no." So I'm gonna go with Putin. You know, and listen, Darren, I know we're laughing and making jokes, but like if I see that as like a serious possibility, I mean, he's already given this dude enough cover. You know what I mean? But I do think that smarter forces around him would basically force him to do some sort of action. The problem is that you can't sanction him really much anymore. Like there's no bigger sanction you can put on him. But I don't know if Trump may be stupid enough to just try to tomahawk the Kremlin, which
Well, you know, you make a good point about, Trump taking Putin's side, but like you just said about tomahawking the Kremlin, I mean, Trump is not afraid of escalation. I mean, as you know, I mean, he assassinated Soleimani, the IRGC leader, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna go to war with Iran. We're gonna get," because that was just such an insane escalation out of like nowhere,
right.
So, I mean, I don't think Trump is afraid to hit the button. I'm not talking about nukes necessarily, but I don't think he's afraid to escalate things. Like to me, he seems more than willing. So, uh, I don't know. I think, we could definitely see significant escalation if this deal goes through, and then if uh, human shield gets hit. So,
Yeah, we just have to hope that cooler heads prevail, right?
oh yeah,
But
I do.
well, I'll give you the final word on this thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess my final thoughts on the events as of late are just I think the deal is not my fantasy deal, but it's pretty good for for Zelensky's position because Zelensky really has no leverage. I think it's probably the best he's going to get. And if you think about it, I mean, it does entrench the U.S. further. So I think it's a pretty good deal all around for Zelensky. I think he should have been more. I think he should have just swallowed the insults and whatever was infuriating him during the meeting. Uh, that's kind of my thought. Uh, I mean, I feel for the guy, but at some point you just kind of got to deal with the cards you're dealt. So I think he should have just, yeah, taken the deal, and it's fairly good. Do you want to say anything else, or do you want to end it there?
I'll just say this, and this will be the last thing. I totally get why he was upset. I totally get why he didn't want to do it, and totally understand why he wanted to add like written security guarantees. But like you said, he doesn't really have any leverage, I would argue, unless Europe is really going to step up their game. Which, not that they haven't played a crucial role in this war already, but they would have to basically double what they're already prepared to give. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll shock me, but I'm not optimistic because they don't want to divide this is another thing that Zelensky said. They don't want to divide NATO allies on this. So in other words, if the United States says we're done, like I'm not doing it anymore, then the rest of NATO may be like, well, you know, we don't want to divide. We don't want division amongst our allies. But hopefully, if we do pull out and we do say nothing, which I don't think is likely, but if we do that, hopefully Europe at least says like, no, America is the one being the odd man out. We're going to step up. So that would be ideal.